The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Book 5, The High King. Chapter 18, Mount Dragon. As Dolly had foretold, Lassar had led the warriors to shelter in a cave and had saved them from the full fury of the snowstorm. The companions now made ready to continue their journey. The sharp crags that were their last obstacle lay not far distant. The crest of Mount Dragon loomed dark and forbidding. With the help of Taran's healing potions and Ilanwe's care, Arkan had regained consciousness. Fluider was still reluctant to come within fewer than 3 paces of the black-robed queen, but Gurgi had finally taken enough courage to open his wallet and offer food to the half-starved woman. Although the creature's face wrinkled uneasily and he held out the morsel at arm's length, as if fearful of being bitten. Arkan, however, ate sparingly. Glue, for his part, lost no time in snatching up what remained, popping it into his mouth and glancing about to see whether more might be forthcoming. Arkan's fever had left her weakened in body, yet her face had lost none of its haughtiness, and after Taran had briefly recounted what had brought the companions so close to Anuvan, it was with ill-disguised scorn that she answered him.
Does a pig keeper and his shabby followers hope to triumph where a queen failed? I would have reached Anuvan long since, had it not been for Mag and his warriors. By chance, his band came upon me in Cantref Catafer.
Her broken lips drew back in a bitter grimace.
They left me for dead. I heard Mag laugh when they told him I had been slain. He too shall know my vengeance. Yes, I lay in the forest like a wounded beast, but my hatred was sharper than their sword thrusts. I would have crept after them on hands and knees and given my last strength to strike them down, though indeed I feared that I would die unrevenged. But I found refuge. There are still those in Prydain who pay homage to Arkan. Until I could journey once again, they sheltered me, and for that service they shall be rewarded. Yet I failed even within sight of my goal. The Gwythaints were more ruthless than Mag. They would have made certain of my death. I, who once commanded them. Sharp will be their punishment.
I have the awful feeling, Ilanwe whispered to Taran, that Arkan sometimes thinks she's still Queen of Prydain. Not that I mind, so long as she doesn't take it into her head to try to punish us.
Arkan, overhearing Ilanwe's remarks, turned to the girl.
Forgive me, Princess of Lear, she said quickly. I spoke half in rambling dream and cold comforts of memory. I am grateful to you for my life and shall repay you far beyond its worth. Hear me well. Would you pass the mountain bastions of Anuvan? You follow the wrong path.
Humph! Dolly cried, popping visible for a moment.
Don't tell one of the fair folk he's on the wrong path.
Yet it is true, Arkan replied. There are secrets unknown even to your people.
It's no secret that if you cross mountains, you choose the easiest way, Dolly snapped. And that's what I plan. I'm taking my bearings from Mount Dragon. But you can believe me, once we're closer, we'll turn aside and find a passage through the lower slopes. You think I'm such a fool as to do otherwise?
Arkan smiled contemptuously.
In so doing, dwarf, you would indeed be a fool. Of all the peaks surrounding Anuvan, Mount Dragon alone can be breached. Heed me, she added as Taran murmured in disbelief. The crags are lures and traps. Others have been deceived and their bones lie in the pitfalls. The lower mountains beckon with promise of easier passage, but no sooner are they crossed than they fall away into sheer cliffs. Does Mount Dragon warn you to shun its heights? The western descent is a very roadway to the iron portals of Anuvan. To reach it, there is a hidden trail, which I shall guide you.
Taran looked closely at the queen. Such are your words, Arkan. Do you ask us to stake our lives on them? Arkan's eyes glittered.
In your heart you fear me, pig keeper. But which do you fear the more? The path I offer you, or the certain death of Lord Gwydion? Do you seek to overtake Aron's Cauldron warriors? This you cannot do, for time will defeat you unless you follow where I lead. This is my gift to you, Pigkeeper. Scorn it if you choose, and we shall go our separate ways.
Arkin turned and muffled herself with her ragged cloak. The companions drew away from her and spoke among themselves. Dolly, thoroughly vexed and disgruntled by Arkin's judgment of his skill, nonetheless admitted that he could have unwittingly led them astray.
We fair folk have never dared to journey here, and I can't prove what she says one way or the other. But I've seen mountains that look sheer on one side, and on the other you could roll down without so much as a bump. So she could be telling the truth.
And she could be trying to get rid of us the fastest way she knows,
the bard put in.
Those pitfalls with bones in them make my flesh creep. I think Arkin would be delighted if some of those bones were ours. She's playing her own game, you can be sure of that.
He shook his head uneasily.
A Flam is fearless, but with Arkin, I prefer being wary.
Tarn was silent a moment, searching for the wisdom to choose one way or the other, and again felt the weight of the burden Gwydion had set upon him to be more than he could bear. Arkin's face was a pallid mask. He could read nothing of her heart in it. More than once the queen would have taken the lives of the companions, but, as he knew, she had served Alban well and faithfully after her own powers had been shattered. I believe, he said slowly, that we can do no less than trust her until she gives us clear reason to doubt. I fear her, he added, as do all of us. Yet I will not let fear blind me to hope. I agree, said Eilonwy, which makes me think in this case at least your judgment is quite right. I admit that trusting Arkin is like letting a hornet sit on your nose, but sometimes you only get stung when you try to brush it off. The hornet, I mean. Tarn went to Arkin's side. Lead us to Mount Dragon, he said. We will follow you. Another day's travel brought the companions across a harsh, uneven valley that lay within the shadow of Mount Dragon itself. The summit had been well named, for Tarn saw its peak was in the rough shape of a monstrous, crested head with gaping jaws, and on either side the lower slopes spread like outflung wings. The great blocks and shafts of stone that rose to form its jagged bulk were dark, molted with patches of dull red. Before this last barrier, poised as though to swoop downward and crush them, the companions fearfully halted. Arkin strode to the head of the waiting column and beckoned them onward.
There are other, easier paths,
Arkin said as they entered a narrow defile that twisted between towering walls of sheer cliffs.
But they are longer, and those who travel them can be seen before they reach the stronghold of Anuvan. This one is known only to Arin and his most trusted servants, and to me, for it was I who showed him the secret ways of Mount Dragon.
Tarn, however, soon began to fear Arkin had deceived them, for the path rose so steeply that men and horses could barely keep their footing. Arkin seemed to be leading them deep into the heart of the mountain. Mighty shelves of overhanging rocks rose like arches above the toiling band, blotting the sky from their sight. At times, the path skirted yawning chasms, and more than once Tarn stumbled, buffeted by a sudden chill blast that flung him against the walls. His heart pounded, and his head reeled at the sight of the deep gorges opening at his feet, and terrified he clung to the sharp edges of jutting rocks. Arkin, whose step did not falter, only turned and silently glanced at him, a mocking smile on her ravaged face. The path continued to rise, though not so abruptly, for it no longer followed the slope of the mountain, but seemed almost to double back on itself, and the companions gained the higher reaches of the trail only by small degrees. The huge stone jaws of the dragon's head loomed above them. The trail, which, for some of its course, had been hidden by grotesque formations of rocks, now lay exposed, and Tarn could see most of the mountain slope dropping sharply below him. They were almost at the highest ridge of the dragon's shoulder, and it was there that Ka, scouting ahead, returned to them and clacked his beak frantically.
Gwydion! Gwydion!
The crow jabbered at the top of his voice.
Anuvan! Haste!
Tarn sprang past Arkin and raced to the ridge, clambering upward among the rocks, straining his eyes for a glimpse of the stronghold. Had the Sons of Dawn already begun their attack on Anuvan? Had Gwydion's warriors themselves overtaken the Cauldron-born? His heart pounded against his ribs. He struggled higher. Suddenly, the dark towers of Aron's fastness were below him. Beyond the high walls, beyond the massive iron portals, ugly and brooding, he glimpsed the spreading courtyards, the hall of warriors where once the black cauldron had stood. Aron's great hall rose, glittering like black, polished marble, and above it, at the highest pinnacle, floated the Death Lord's banner. The sight of Anuvan sickened him with the chill of death that hung over it. His head spun and shadows seemed to blind him. He pressed higher. Struggling shapes filled the courtyard. The clash of blades and shouting battle cries struck his ears. Men were scaling the western wall. Dark Gate itself had been breached, and Taran believed he saw the flash of Malingar's white flanks and golden mane, and the tall figures of Gwydion and Taliesin. The Comet men had not failed. Aron's deathless host had been held back, and victory was in Gwydion's hands. But even as Taran turned to shout the joyous tidings, his heart froze. Southward he glimpsed the hastening army of Cauldronborn. Their iron-shod boots rang and clattered as the mute warriors raced toward the heavy gates, and the horns of the troop captains shrieked for vengeance. Taran leaped from the ridge to join the companions. The shelf of stone crumbled at his feet. He pitched forward. Eilonwe's scream rang in his ears, and the sharp rocks seemed to whirl upward against him. Desperately, he clutched at them and strove to break his fall. With all his strength, he clung to the sheer side of Mount Dragon, while jagged stones bit like teeth into his palms. His sword, ripped from his belt, clattered into the gorge. He saw the horrified faces of the companions above him and knew he was beyond their reach. His muscles trembling, his lungs bursting with his efforts, he fought to climb upward to the path. His foot slipped and he twisted about to regain his balance. It was then that he saw, plunging from the peak of Mount Dragon, the Gwythaints speeding toward him.